to the podcast where we talk about all the things that are hidden in the shadows. This is Isaac.
This is Megan.
And on this episode that Megan wanted to do.
Yes, I definitely wanted to do this because if you follow us, you know that we always find ourselves in the midst of swamp-like areas, and that also I always have dreams, meditations, visualizations, whatever you want to call it, around swamps. And I really don't know why, because swamps in general terrify me. Like the idea of like the stagnant water, the idea that alligators are lurking around or possible giant snakes or whatever freaks me out. But we always seem to find ourselves in locations that are either heavily wooded or swamp-like, i.e. the park and stuff like that. And so like Waccamaw, that was another one.
I really call it swamp.
Yeah, it's not really a swamp, but I mean there's a lot of alligators apparently. Like they warn you, like, by the way, you're swimming
Didn't even see one.
Yeah. But it was also like fall time, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But apparently people have swam in the lake, and as they're swimming, just see like alligators scooting by, which is terrifying to me. So, but we're going to be talking about like some swamps that are more swamp-like. So we're talking like the Great Dismal Swamp, which is on the North Carolina-Virginia border, the ones in Louisiana, and we're even going to talk about one in Alabama that apparently they found porcelain dolls impaled there. And it kind of goes along the lines too, I think, when you talk about like, because obviously when you're in the paranormal, you hear things like about rituals at locations and witchcraft. That's not so much on the light side, that's on the dark side. And a lot of these swamp locations are known for that as well. But then the history of swamps too also play a key role, and I think in the paranormal activity and what kind of stays trapped there and all of that. So that's all the stuff we're going to go through today.
I always see swamps as like, and I was telling you this before, they're where water sits, right? And because where the water sits, a lot of microbes and stuff are in it, a lot of bacteria, a lot of life, right, in that one area of water. It kind of moves slowly, but majority of it just sits, and it's always shallow on the land. And it always reminds me of the idea of like a human body, right? So much life in one place, one vessel, essentially. So I can see why spirits get trapped at certain locations like that, because it almost like one giant human body in one area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess we could start off with the Great Dismal Swamp. That is pretty much when you hear about haunted swamps. Anyways, when you hear about haunted swamps, that's the first thing that a lot of people go to. So a lot of these swamps too, it's important to know the history because, like, for instance, a lot of the swamps have a lot of indigenous history to them. A lot of the tribes use swamps as a way to combat the settlers when they were coming, because they were able to be familiar with how to navigate a swamp, whereas the settlers had no clue what they were getting themselves into. Same with kind of like the little wars that would, not little wars, there was bigger wars, but like just the little scuffles that would happen between the native tribes and the settlers that weren't like super well known. A lot of those took place in the swamp areas. And then too, people that were enslaved sometimes would go and hide out in the swamps, and swamps played a very big role in the Underground Railroad. So I thought that was interesting too. The Great Dismal Swamp. So the early inhabitants, archaeological evidence suggests that varying cultures of humans have inhabited the swamp for 13,000 years. Prior to European colonization, Algonquin-speaking Native American coastal tribes lived in the swamp. The Powhatan Empire extended to the northern edge of the swamp around the time of the settling of Jamestown in 1600. Displacing the Chesapeake tribe, villages of various tribes, including the Chesapeake and the Chowan, I think is how you say that, once dotted the swamp's perimeter, and the natives would venture deeper to hunt or fish. As European settlements expanded and pushed Native Americans off the lands, some retreated into the swamps. So in 1665, and we're talking strictly on the Great Dismal Swamp, like that area, William Drummond, the first governor of North Carolina, was the first European recorded as discovering the swamp's lake, which was subsequently named Lake Drummond. Of course it was. Anyways, he was on a hunting expedition with 3 others, but he was the only one to return alive. In 1728, William Byrd II led a land survey to establish a boundary between Virginia and North Carolina, and made unfavorable observations of the swamp and was credited with naming it the Dismal Swamp. He described it as a horrible desert and a miserable morass where nothing could inhabit. So at that time, the swamp was estimated to cover 2,000 square miles. So quite a bit. There was early exploitation attempts. In 1763, George Washington visited the area and actually founded the Dismal Swamp Company with the goal of draining the swamp for settlement and farming. Which I never knew they thought about doing that. Draining the swamps?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. While the farming venture proved difficult due to the soil, the company later shifted to the more profitable goal of timber harvesting, particularly bald cypress and Atlantic white cedar. So that's kind of like the history of how the knowing of the Great Dismal Swamp came to be. And like I said earlier, the swamp essentially was the refugee area for a group of people called the Maroons. The swamp served as a critical refugee location for the Great Dismal Swamp Maroons, is what they were called. And this included a bunch of different people, enslaved people coming from the southern states, as well as Native Americans fleeing colonial expansion. And this is essentially where these people found refuge, is in the swamps. And so over the years, by the mid-20th century, conservation groups advocated for the preservation of the Great Dismal Swamp. And now it's used more as like conservation than anything. But I thought that was interesting because that history isn't far off from all the other swamps history as well. So I think that's just interesting. And it also correlates to a lot of stuff we've even came to figure out in the swamp areas where we are, about there being a lot of native spirits and stuff like that. Right?
Yes. And it just reminded me of, there's a chapter in the People's History of the United States that talks about that.
Really?
But it's far too brutal to bring up on this podcast.
Oh, okay.
And those who have read People's History, and if you haven't, I suggest it. People's History of the United States. It's, when you see why they fled into said swamp.
Yeah. And when you think about it, that was not an easy life. So for them to go from what they know to that, that's horrible. But so the Great Dismal Swamp is known for a lot of unexplained phenomena, including ghostly apparitions. So people will see ghosts and spectral figures within the swamp. And this is something that I also wanted to bring up because I've noticed when we are in swamp areas, the most frequent apparition ghost entity that I've personally seen is the hooded figure, shadow people. Amongst the trees. It's always amongst the trees. I saw it at Lake Waccamaw. I see it at the park. Anytime I remote view into some of these swamp areas, same thing. It's like these hooded, they almost look like guardians, but they're not. They have like the cape, cloak kind of thing. Almost like the Grim Reaper, but it's not. So I find that interesting as well. And even when I dream or have meditations or visualizations of a swamp, remote viewing, that kind of thing, they always pop up. But apparently there was a legend of Lady of the Lake, which is frequently mentioned. And there's different stories about it, but they believe it's the spirit of a woman who was either a bride-to-be or Native American, who paddles a white canoe on Lake Drummond at night, illuminated by a firefly lamp, searching for her lost lover, and you can hear her mournful cries. Which, that's another thing that's kind of interesting too from the swamp areas that we've been to, is the sounds you hear, which I get it, wildlife, all of that. I know it's like, you know, you're going into an area that's like super organic, especially with the forest and all of that stuff. You got weird creatures, you got the bullfrogs, you got like all of that. I get that. But we've heard some weird, just unexplained noises before. And lights too. That was another thing. There was one time when we were at the park, which is, you know, swampy. And I've actually captured on a photo what looks like a lantern moving, and that's not the only place. We've seen it at even the sinkholes, which is also kind of swampy. It's another like swamp marshland type area at Patsy's Pond. And so I think that's interesting that that's also correlating to other locations as well that are swampy. But yeah, mysterious lights, and of course, you know, people that are more skeptic will say it's the methane gas, it's the swamp lights, it's like, it's natural, it just happens. But some of the lights that I've personally seen, there's no explanation for it.
The amount of investigations, the amount of fishermen, the amount of people who hang around swamps all the time. You think swamp lights would be more of a normal phenomenon. But the last ones, I think, were seen over the early 1900s. They actually see traces of it.
Yeah.
Now it's more of a rare phenomenon that anyone's ever seen ever.
Yeah.
But it's more common to see lights on the fucking on the swamp than it is to see swamp lights.
Yeah. Well, like for us, I know one time when we were investigating the park, we saw literally, it looked like a ball of light bouncing, like someone with a flashlight like, bouncing the light off the lake. Or not lake, the river, sorry. And there was no explanation for it. So apparently in the Great Dismal Swamp, there is a phantom graveyard that pops up. Kind of like, I don't know if you guys remember me talking about it, but there's a haunted location. I forgot the name of it, but it's a park now. And they have where this random white house will appear to people. They go up to the white house and it disappears. This is the same thing. And apparently this phantom graveyard only shows up to people that are off the beaten path or get lost in the swamp, which I find interesting. Because is it actually a phenomenon, or is it a hallucination of something kind of bothering you and making you see that?
I don't know. I'd have to see it to experience it to get a good idea of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird though. Yeah. Which is another weird thing too, because when we were talking about Lake Waccamaw, the spirits there were talking about a graveyard that hasn't been discovered yet, apparently. Which I thought was...
Or forgotten about.
Yeah, which again, it's another interesting, weird correlation to all these different like swamps. So another thing is apparently disappearing prey. So hunters have shared stories of shooting animals, such as deer, only for the bodies to be vanished without a trace, and there's no blood or tracks. Which is another weird thing. And of course, people have said that they've seen things like shape-shifting things when it comes to animals there, as well as there's Native American legends that tell of kind of creatures shape-shifting. So
swamps supposed... Isn't there a lot of swamps known to have some cryptids there as well?
Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about one of them too.
Okay.
But yeah, there's all sorts of things. There's Native American legends about like huge serpents being in swamps. There's like almost like Bigfoot-like creatures in Louisiana. There is a
forget the puckwudgies.
Yeah, puckwudgies, and that was also associated with like bouncing lights and lights on swamps. And then there's also Louisiana, there's like a werewolf creature called the ragu-ragu.
Ragu-ragu?
Yeah. I heard someone say it, so I know I'm saying okay. So I know it's not just a Megan pronunciation. I know that's how you say it. But yeah, so, and apparently, obviously, people that vanish, which, I mean, and just like if you were to go into those, like a desert or a mountainous terrain or anything like that, even woods, I mean, it's easy to get lost, especially in a swamp, and we know that just from our experience. And 2, you have prey, you have all that. So there's vanishing people, but at the same time, you have to kind of look at the
little frying pan.
Oh my gosh. See, this is why we need to do like video for our podcast, because he's literally has a Lego piece acting like he's frying a frying pan. Okay.
Flip over that pancake.
Oh my god.
I need something to fidget with. Sorry.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So, obviously the swamp is a very dense wilderness with murky waters, and you never know when an alligator is going to come and snag you. Just kidding. That's like my worst fear. You know what would be?
You will hear it before you see it.
But you know what my worst fear in my life is if someone picked me up and dropped me in the, like, I don't know how they would pick me up and drop me, but like pick me up and drop me in the middle of a swamp water. That, like, you want to know what really gives me the heebie-jeebies? Like, yeah, demons and stuff like freak me out, stuff like that. But I mean, I can handle it, right? But what really freaks me the hell out is when I watch those videos. I don't know if you've ever seen it on TikTok of that guy that goes out in the Everglades, the Florida Everglades, and he taps his foot at the water. He goes barefoot and he goes and yoinks these freaking pythons and stuff, these snakes, and then you see all the eyes of the oh my gosh, no, I can't do that. I must have had some kind of past life thing, but it terrifies me. So just putting that out there.
I mean, I don't want to be eating either, but I don't want to deal with bugs.
I could not. But apparently, okay, so also with the swamps, like I said, there's like rituals and talk of covens and stuff like that in almost all of the swamp locations. And I mean, some of that stuff I think could be very fear-based, or like, you don't want to go out in the swamp because the weird witch coven might take you, like that kind of thing. But on the other side of that, there is some funky stuff that gets done at these locations. But what was that?
There's that old term out there called the swamp witch.
Yeah, exactly.
Lives a little house hut on the water.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Some of that stuff is fictional, but some of it's, I don't know, true.
Got bones hanging from the fucking door and shit.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they say. Yeah, because apparently even back in the olden days, the wife of William Drummond, which was the first governor of North Carolina and all that stuff, he went on an expedition to find this coven in the swamp. Which, I mean, when you think about back then, anybody that was doing anything abnormal was considered a witch. So, or anybody that just didn't like somebody would just say, witch! But yeah, so as of right now, the Great Dismal Swamp is like a state park, and there is conservation efforts and stuff like that. So, yeah. You ready to go to the next swamp? Ready to take a little boat drive to the next swamp? You ready for this? Okay, so the next swamp. Why you give me that weird look?
Boat ride. Every time I think of swamps and boats, I think of the airboats.
Oh, I couldn't do that. I literally would have so much anxiety doing that. And it's so ironic because like I want to go visit like Louisiana and experience all the things, that like Louisiana and everything, but I don't know if I could do that swamp stuff, like going on the boat. Oh, the worst thing for me is going on the boat and it tipping. Oh my god. Okay.
Or to rocket it. I said, stop.
No, I would seriously. I think I would have a panic. Like, see, I'm just getting like hot and like freaked out right now. Like anyways. Oh no, thank you. But see, that's the issue that I have is like, I wonder if it's just I dream about it and stuff like that because I have that fear of the swamp. Because anybody that's been following us knows that one of the first dreams that was super, super vivid that I had when I started diving into my abilities was me on a canoe in this like bayou type of swamp area. And I would go hut to hut to hut in the dream and see these Polaroids of people. I don't know why swamps are such a thing with me, but so the next swamp is in Louisiana. It's the Manchac Swamp, located in Louisiana. It's about 30 minutes northwest of New Orleans, and it's located near Lake Pontchartrain, I believe is how you say it. And it's part of the Manchac Swamp. And it's, so the history of the area goes back to 1763 when the British built Fort Butte at the junction of the Iberville River and the Mississippi. The fort became a key military and trading post in British West Florida. Over the years, it was captured many times, and first by Spanish forces in 1775 and later by American forces during the Revolutionary War. By the mid-1800s, the community grew around the railroad system, and the area became known as Manchac. In the 1850s, German immigrants settled in the nearby town called Frontier, but the area's story took a darker turn in 1915 when Julia Brown got introduced. So, again, whether this person is actually a voodoo priestess or whatever you want to call it is speculation. So this isn't 100% true, because it even says she just may have been a healer that, got told that she was, or got told that she was like some voodoo priestess living in the swamp, but others just assumed she was a healer. So, but she was known for her singing. One of her songs warned that when she died, she would take the town with her. On the day of her funeral, a powerful hurricane struck, wiping out Frontier. Hundreds died, including many attending her burial, and their bodies were put in a mass grave in the swamp alongside Julie. The storm left behind not only destruction but eerie stories, and people claim that Julie's curse caused the hurricanes. And tales of her voice being heard in the wind when you're walking in the swamp still linger. So, yeah. Just to go even further into Julie. So Julie Brown, also known as Julie White, Julie Black, or Aunt Julia Brown, lived in the small town of Frontier on the edge of Louisiana's Manchac Swamp during the late 19th and early 20th century. She was a key figure in the community, revered as a voodoo priestess, healer, and midwife. So basically, when the doctors weren't around, she would use her remedies and guidance to help heal people. Over time, the people of Frontier began to grow suspicious of Julie's abilities. Rumors circulated that her magic had become too strong, perhaps even manipulative. And so word began to spread around the community, and people started becoming uneasy of Julie. So she would often go sit on her porch playing her guitar and singing songs. One of her songs, like I said earlier, contained the cryptid line of "One day I'm going to die and take the whole town with me." This was originally dismissed as a mere superstition, but this prophecy later linked to the hurricane event. So, yeah. And like I said, some people say that she was manipulative and a voodoo priestess and crazy and all that stuff. And then others redeemed her as just somebody in the community that was able to heal people. And I feel like that is a story that's echoed throughout tons of different haunted locations, tons of different legends and stuff in the paranormal, and especially during that time period. But yeah, so apparently, obviously, you have the curse of Julia Brown. So that's part of the paranormal activity that's there. But then also, they say that the ghost of Julia Brown is also in the swamp. Restless spirits of the hurricane that happened, and then people have said that they have seen a young woman in a floating white dress, who they believe to be either somebody that Julia Brown cursed or a bride to be. Ghostly sounds. They can hear chanting as if ancient rituals were being performed. Whispers drifting in the air. Phantom sounds. And of course, the Manchac Swamp is also rumored to be the home of the werewolf creature called the ragu-ragu. Which is essentially looks like a werewolf.
Or a dogman.
Yeah, kind of like that, yeah. And apparently there are legends of massive alligators in the swamp as well. So that's one place I will not be going. But yeah, so crazy energy in the swamp, obviously. And I feel like that's any swamp in general. You're going to have crazy energy pockets. You're going to have intense residual energy, especially with what took place with the indigenous communities and the people that were enslaved and how they ran and all of that stuff. But yeah, so that's Manchac Swamp.
When it comes to ancient legends and stuff like that, it's best to take the Native Americans' information versus everyone else. Because everyone else came here and they brought whatever they had with them here.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of stories that they have, or it's their interpretations of what they experienced as they were here for the first time, versus people who have been here for hundreds of years, thousands even, and what they experience. So a lot of this negative energy seems to be brought here. Yeah.
Yeah, and you got to think just back then, we in today's society, with all of the things that we have, we're able to do, and times are still harsh now, but it wasn't like as harsh as it was back then. Your chance of survival is greater now than back then. And you didn't have to worry about like now some of the crazy stuff that happens. I mean, you still got to worry and all that stuff, but it's definitely less than it was back then. And I could just imagine, even today, our energy dictates a lot of the residual stuff that takes place at locations and houses and lands and stuff like that. I could just imagine back then when anxiety was always high, there was always like crazy stuff going on, fights and wars and stuff like that. But yeah, so we're going to go to the next swamp, which is called Honey Island Swamp in Louisiana. But this one is near Slidell in St. Tammany Parish, and it consists of pristine marshlands covering about 70,000 acres. So that's a lot. The swamp is situated in the southeastern corner of Louisiana, which one of my sources that I used to research called it, or quoted, said deep in Cajun country. So, it is near the town of Pearl River, which borders Mississippi and Louisiana, with the Pearl River dividing the borders of the states. But yeah, so the swamp got its name from a large colony of bees that were found within the swamp. The Honey Island Bayou is considered one of the best preserved areas in Louisiana and is a vast labyrinth of swamps formed by the arms of the Mississippi draining into the sea. The area is sparsely populated and inaccessible by car. So also adds a little intrigue there, a little spookiness to it. You can't get there by car. But yeah, so they say it's considered one of the most primitive swamps in America. And most people in the region tend to live on the ridges around the swampy area. So there is some isolation when you get into the swamp. But the Honey Island Swamp is known for paranormal activity, specifically around the idea of the Honey Island Swamp Monster, which is essentially like Bigfoot. So the Honey Island Swamp Monster is described as an alleged humanoid creature similar to Bigfoot, said to inhabit the Honey Island Swamp and surrounding wetlands. It is a cryptid. Descriptions of the monster vary, but it's often depicted as a 7 to 8 foot tall bipedal creature covered in shaggy gray hair with glowing yellow or red eyes and emitting a horrific odor.
Most Bigfoots give off bad odors.
Yeah. So, apparently the first sighting was in 1963 by Harlan Ford, who later reported finding weird footprints and a dead boar with its throat gashed. So that was his story about it. some people believe it's just like a hoax, that there's no actual monster, but then some locals actually really believe that there is a Honey Island swamp monster. But yeah, so that is that one. And that's pretty much, and the Honey Island swamp monster, or not swamp monster, but the Honey Island swamp too, is again the same kind of thing. You get weird lights, you get ghostly apparitions from the past, and you got to think of how secluded it is as well. You're gonna have some weird stuff going on there. So, but they think that is where the Honey Island swamp monster lives. Would you go in there?
I would go anywhere as long as I'm
no,
dry.
I could not.
And I have to deal with god dang mosquitoes.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. Every time I think of mosquitoes, I think of Lake Waccamaw and just how horrible it was. Yeah. I looked like my teenage self. It literally looked like I had acne all over my face.
We had chicken pox.
Yeah, it was so bad. And then too, my mom's like, well, I hope you don't get one of those diseases that they say that the mosquitoes carry. And I was like, and then I was thinking, oh my gosh, like the probability on a normal chance is probably very, very low. But the amount of bites that we had that day, yeah. I was like, oh, I don't get a fever or anything like that. But yeah. I had them on my back. They were sucking right through the freaking clothes.
Yeah.
That was so bad every time I think about that. Okay, but the next one is a little creepy one. Okay, so the next one we're going to talk about is the Bear Creek Swamp in Alabama. So, Bear Creek Swamp. I know I keep saying creek.
Bear Creek.
Bear Creek Swamp is considered one of the oldest sacred lands in Alabama, dating back to the original tribes that inhabited. The natives in the area inhabited the region long before settlers came to the area, and they had always regarded the swamp with reverence and caution. Some believe that the lingering spirits of these early inhabitants still roam the wetlands. So there was settler conflicts and some Civil War involvement. So as European settlers moved into the area, conflicts with Native American tribes resulted in bloodshed and a lot of unmarked graves within the swamp. Later during the Civil War, the swamp they believe was a strategic, they used the swamp for strategic movement, and they believe that a lot of soldiers actually met some of their deaths in the swamp. And the swamps, how I would assume, especially back then, is that once the bodies especially if there was a lot of men, when they fell, that's pretty much where they went, because it would be difficult. It's already difficult on a normal day to get through the swamp, let alone try and drag these bodies out. So over time, Black Creek Swamp became synonymous with the ghostly apparitions, floating orbs of light, and chilling legends. So this is a creepy one. Oh my gosh. So a prominent legend is that of what's called the Weeping Mother, right? Mm-hmm. And this is giving me La Llorona vibes. So apparently there's a woman who lost her child in the swamp and whose spirit eternally searches for her lost baby. It is said that if you say, "We have your baby," 3 times at night near the swamp, the woman will attack you. People have reported hearing screams and even feeling physically attacked after uttering those words. That's just, but it's just creepy when you, oh, that just creeps me out. Would you say that and see what happens?
Yeah, because I just fucking pull her ass. Gotcha.
Yeah, just the idea of that is weird. Just going out there, it reminds me of that one freaking urban legend my friend told me back a long time ago. This was just a random thing she told me, but she told me of this legend that apparently, if you hold a baby doll and you sit in a room solid pitch black, and you start rocking, and you say, I forgot what you say, but it was something like that, right? You called somebody almost like the whole Bloody Mary thing. And you rock and you rock. And before, like, you say that, but you're supposed to say something else, like, go away. This isn't your baby or something like that. And before you, if you don't say it, and you reach for the light, apparently you get scratched. And I had multiple friends try this at a sleepover, and apparently they had scratches on themselves. Like, you get it right on your forearm. I don't know. That stuff freaks me out, though. Like, I was always freaked out by that one when I was a kid.
I always wonder, though, like, if we were to try any of those things, would the entity not come because it's us, or would it be just simply me feeling it, grabbing it before it happens?
I don't know. Who knows? Maybe we end up in the swamp. Anyways. But of course, reports of phantom lights and herbs. So, oh my gosh, what is with me today? Orbs, not herbs. Orbs are frequent. And then 2, people have gotten communications through communicating with the spirits at this location. Strange sounds, though, like deep voices, knocking, and whispers also accompany these sightings. Ghostly figures, including apparitions of Native Americans, Civil War soldiers, are said to appear and disappear. Apparently, there's a small 4-foot-tall figure that appears in front of cars and disappears. That was another reported thing. Apparently, though, the swamp, for the teenagers in the area, is considered a rite of passage. So generations of local teenagers have tested their courage by venturing into the swamp at night. And apparently few claim to have stayed till daybreak. So that's always terrifying. I don't think I would do that as a teenager. Just because I wouldn't be able to stay till daybreak. There's no way I could stay in a swamp overnight. Not for like spirits and crazy creatures and stuff. Well, I don't like the alligators. And it's so crazy that I have such a fear of alligators.
Yeah, but if you're not going to be in the water.
Yeah, well, those things would come snag you if they wanted to.
You would hear it coming.
I know, but it's just still. But so here's another creepy thing. So if you're not a fan of dolls, this is going to be extra creepy for you. So apparently the discovery of 21 porcelain dolls impaled on bamboo stakes in 2014 added another layer to the swamp's creepiness. Many of their faces were painted white, and while authorities thought it was a prank or a hoax, some locals believed it could be part of a ritual or warning. The dolls were recovered by the sheriff's office and remain in the evidence room. So that's extra creepy. But of course, with everything like that, you got to take it with a grain of salt, because if it's a known haunted location, especially in that area, of course they're going to do spooky stuff like that.
Would you consider the Isle of Dolls a swamp area as well?
I would guess I would.
Yeah.
I would like. It's almost like any kind of like stagnant water with a heavy ecosystem.
'Cause when I think about it, I don't think of like flowing water. I think like it's just sitting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a swamp.
And the scariest thing about a swamp is the smell.
Oh, yeah, it smells like fart.
It's like bottled up fart.
Yeah.
But one of like when we were doing like Walk-A-Mon, we said this in the episode that we kind of like unraveled everything that we experienced at like Walk-A-Ma, other than the mosquitoes.
Yeah.
I was in Barnes and Noble, and I was actually looking through the different books about like witchcraft and stuff like that, because at the park we've actually found like spell jars and stuff like that getting tossed into the water and stuff like that, and weird stuff like that, which again, witchcraft, there is people that just do light stuff and work with nature, that kind of stuff, and then there's people that take it to the other side and do like more of the darker stuff, and there's even like different levels of the dark stuff, I think, too. But I was reading, it was a book about like just witchcraft in general, and I remember reading about swamps and about how a lot of witches will are practicing people of magic, will dump spell bottles to clear the energy, or will enhance it because of the fact that it is stagnant water. So it'll almost like whatever spell that they're doing will hit the person harder, or will like hold the energy more because it's stagnant. So you put all of that in a melting pot, and it makes sense of why swamps have so much energy.
Yeah, the fucking putting jars in there shit. That's like a. It's probably why we have a continuous battle in every location we've investigated that has swamps, because we consistently have to pull negative energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And see, and then that's the thing, because like I'll tell you, it's. You just have to know what you're looking at when it comes to rituals and stuff, witchcraft. And now I've gotten to a point where I kind of understand a lot of what's going on. And like, for instance, I posted on Instagram that I went to the cemetery my mom's been nagging me to go to. And at the place, there was some, even my mom and my dad said there were some funky markings that didn't make sense. And we found a bunch of crystals buried, and near one of the graves there was a pile of pine cones, like somebody left as an offering. It was kind of weird, but technically those kind of things wouldn't necessarily show like dark intent. It's almost just like you're honoring what's there. You know, obviously the crystals are because I think it was like amethyst and quartz, so that's more of like, you know, positive energy and putting things like that. It doesn't help that I was right next to a Masonic temple too. Yeah. But like a big ass one, and it did not have a good vibe to it at all. Like, it was some shady shit. Like, even my mom was like, there is some shady shit going on there. And I was like, yeah, I know. And it's so ironic that at every single, at least over here in North Carolina, every single funky place that we've been to so far that has had crazy energy, there's a Masonic temple, or the Masons are involved in some way, shape, or form. Like the Octagon House. Yeah. They own it.
Well, it was the area around the Octagon House that really had troublesome stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that cemetery I went to yesterday was and Wilmington in general has some crazy stuff. But I think too, at these locations sometimes it's jumped to conclusions, like when somebody does like the lighter witchcraft stuff, that, oh, there's witch rolls and crazy stuff here and blood sacrifices and stuff like that, and it's not really the case. So you just got to be aware of what you're looking at when it comes to that kind of stuff. Maybe one day, who knows, we'll do an episode on like rituals and weird stuff that's taken place at haunted locations. So if you're listening, you can tell the difference when you see it. Because I've learned a lot since doing the podcast, talking to people and looking up my own stuff and figuring it out. And now I know, you know, not to get freaked out. Which is weird too. Another weird thing about that doll thing. So when we were at Witching Road, which for sure had dark witchcraft taking place at it. When we first went there that one time, do you remember they had dolls all over the place, like kids' toys all over the place?
Yeah.
It was really like that got me. The bones, the altars, and the kids' toys everywhere freaked me out. But I mean, yeah. So I think too the more intense one, and the reason why I didn't even talk about it on here, with the swamps, is the Manchac Swamp. But we've talked about it in the Bridgewater Triangle, and it's if you haven't heard that episode, I definitely recommend it after this, because we do talk about the Manchac Swamp.
There's a great dark entity trapped there.
Yeah, and there's that one's intense too. That's why we didn't talk about it on this one though. But
because you already talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, learn the puckwudgies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it just goes to show that the legends too with the native tribes in the area, like obviously a lot of the stuff isn't written down, and they probably knew a lot more than what's out there, or what's, you know, out there for you to research. So some of these swamp areas, especially if they're not inhabited, you know, probably hold a lot more legends.
That wrap us up.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about for swamps. We're going to do a bonus episode this week going more in depth into some swamp stuff. Yeah, I'm going to remote view to some.
Oh, okay.
And do some cool stuff. So that one's going to be a me episode. But I will remote view into some other swamps and tell you what I see and what I feel and some stuff that I've collected. And I'm also going to do an update because a swamp location actually played a heavy spot in 2 of my meditations dealing with the gateway tapes.
So, more things to look forward to. As always, you can catch our social medias at Hidden Shadows Podcast on Instagram, Hidden the Podcast 2 on TikTok, or links to all our social media, and always you can listen to us at Hidden Shadows Podcast. You still haven't built the website yet, have you?
No, website's not out yet,
Hey.
but yeah, it's coming. But the website is going to change. It's no longer going to be hiddenintheshadowspodcast.com. That's no longer available.
Yeah.
But if you're listening to this way in the future, and it is out, it should be out in April, it's www.hiddenintheshadows.com.
Yes.
Yes, and you can find everything about the paranormal team. Blog's going to be on there. Any type of merchandise you want to buy from us, that is our merchandise, stickers, that kind of thing, will be all on one website. So
yes, if you want to get hold of us, best place is either do TikTok or Instagram. I think we have a Facebook too, right?
we do, but we really don't. But if you're a Threads person, you like Threads. We've been going on Threads for a while, which I'm starting to like more. I feel like there's more community there than Facebook.
Yeah.
So.
On Facebook, the average age is probably in the 60s.
No, there's young people. No, there's young people on there too. But like,
I wouldn't really use it anymore.
I don't know. I don't like the layout of how Facebook is. I don't like, from a creator's perspective, like, I don't know. I'm just not a Facebook person.
All right. But other than that, we'll catch your widows in the next one.
Yosh.